course, this is a crisis and time is of the essence. This vote began, and the public had not yet seen the bill. Lobbyists had seen the bill. And none of the debate had been held in public. There was virtually no public had more time to understand what this bill is that is meant to help them.
Do you work here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're the elected representatives of the American people.
Understanding.
I love when a elected leader can be condescending and surly when they're essentially fucking the American public over. She's making a good point, right? Basically, you've had this $2 trillion. Nothing like this has ever been spent in American history. And the majority, the lion's share of that, is going to go to the corporate class. Our leaders have betrayed us. We have been royally fucked over. And it gets worse than that, because while they're royally fucking us over, they're also taking a certain policy position in the context of capital, or in the sense of cash, protecting various industries while at the same token letting the public fall to the wayside, and then using the frailty of the public itself, meaning using the fact that the American public has been fucked over the course of the last 50 years or so as somewhat of a club to compel the actions of the various members of Congress. We have been utterly and entirely betrayed. And you ask this question of why the hell is the Democratic Party so goddamn unimaginative or just weak? And maybe this goes back to this kind of crisis of conscience in regards to the party itself. This notion that you can't serve two masters. You have this oligarch class represented by basically the established Democratic order, that entire thing, that machine that lined up against Sanders. You have that. And you have this other aspect of lefties that don't trust that and are something that are fundamentally different in the way that they look at the world, the way they want policy, what they believe is possible. Well, those things clash. You basically have the owners and the bosses in the same party as the workers. Which one are they going to lean to? Well, up to this point, they've leaned to the cash. You have dollars or pitchforks. And for the most part, you've just had dollars in your political system. In this case, you wonder, $2 trillion. And what that turns out to be is like $4.5 trillion once that money gets capitalized, because you can essentially have the money leveraged on itself. Very few strings are attached. They will be able to, at some point, lay off workers. In another case, they can use this money for stock buybacks. And for all of this, for that $4 trillion, what did we get? $1,200 check. And even with the $1,200 check, the Republicans was even going for that. Meaning the position that Democrats took in this race, including Sanders, was just holding on to what was measly offered. Meaning it wasn't something of we are going here. It was more so we're just holding on to what was there. And we're trying to make this incrementally better. It's still a ripoff. You've made a ripoff incrementally better, but it's still a ripoff. And it doesn't even address the main issues that are addressing us in the nation as human beings in this time of crisis. It's utterly astonishing that this is something that's allowed to pass. I always wonder, at which point does the public get angry about this? At which point does the public look at both parties and make this case that these people are not representing us? They're in another fucking reality. That if you're looking what's in the best interest of the public, you come up with fundamentally different answers. You come up with fundamentally different ways of looking at the world. Donald Trump is a disaster on this. And yet, the opposition is so weak and frail that basically Donald Trump's approval rating is going up across the board. The way he's handling this crisis, but also his approval rate is going up. Donald Trump is getting people killed, literally, in the way that he's running the country under this particular crisis and the things that he's been saying. I want to make a very basic point. We have been robbed. We have been robbed. Our leaders have fundamentally betrayed us. And this notion of blue no matter who, this is the problem with blue no matter who. What we're seeing here, this failure of imagination. You go so long without any notion of accountability that when you actually need them to be accountable. You need them to come up with big ideas, with solutions, things that will ameliorate the concerns of the public itself. And they come up with this. This is the best that they could do. The Republican Party is able to skate on this because for the most part, they're the party that look like they're doing something. Meaning Nancy Pelosi, who has control of the House, could have put out a bill. She could have put out a clean bill. She could have said, we're going to send checks to the American population. We're going to send $2,000 to every man, woman, and child. That's what we're going to do. We're going to pay for the corona bills. We're going to get these test kits. This is what we're going to do. She could have did that. And she could have left all this corporate stuff out of it and just focused on getting the checks out to the public and pass your bill and make the Republicans make a choice on whether or not they're going to fuck with that bill and crash it, or are you going to support a clean bill? That's not what happened. You had the Republicans basically set the framing of the debate, set the framing of the bill, and lo and behold, never to let a crisis go to waste, just like 9/11, just like 2008, using this as a way to loot the Treasury. Because inevitably, the congressmen on both parties always end up somehow dumping massive amounts of cash into the hands of people who need it the least. It's fucking utterly astonishing that this passes. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. I've talked about this before, and I've kind of made the point in one of my other videos, I think a few times actually, that they are looting us. Think of it in these terms. I come out and I say, all right, we're going to give tax cuts. Some people say, yes, we're going to get a tax cut. And after they put through the tax cut, you get your 2 cents or you get your $2. Let's say $10. Each month, you get 10 extra dollars. There's a plutocrat somewhere that has been giving money to that particular politician. And that bill, yes, the pittance that you've gotten, that $10, they're getting millions. And because they're getting millions on this notion that you're going to celebrate them looting us in this way for your small pittance. That pittance is just shut up money. It's a bribe. And it's not even the bribe in a way that it's a respectable bribe. It's just a pittance of throwing pennies at the population itself while they rape the population blind. This is utterly astonishing. And while they're doing this corporate giveaway, Donald Trump is saying stuff like, saying stuff like this. And keep in mind, this is the guy whose approval rating is going up. Yeah, Trump is the guy whose approval rating is effectively on the up and up, which gives you some notion of...
Areas are just bigger than they're going to be. I don't believe you need 40,000 or 30,000 ventilators. You know, you go into major hospitals sometimes, they'll have 2 ventilators. And now, all of a sudden, they're saying, can we order 30,000 ventilators? So, look, it's a very bad situation. We haven't seen anything like it. But the end result is we got to get back to work. And I think we can start by opening up certain parts of the country, you know, Farm Belt, certain parts of the Midwest, other places. But
just so we're clear, this policy will get people killed. That's not conjecture. That's perfectly understood by anybody who's paying attention to this and anybody who's advising. It's like health professionals and people who are infectious disease specialists when they're talking about it. Donald Trump is basically arguing, yes, we're going to give $2 trillion into the public purse, And of that, 4.5 trillion will be able to be used as capital effectively to the corporate class with very little restrictions on that money. And we're going to give the American public that has been decimated to the tune of 3.3 million jobs, we're going to give them $1,200 for 1 month. We're not going to put stipulations on the money. We're not going to get equity in those companies. We're not going to get a configuration of those companies where workers get put on the boards of those companies. You're going to get nothing. Barely any restrictions. If roles were reversed and a company was either loaning the government money or they were doing something, there would be no situation where they would give their services over for no fee. Meaning that money should come with strings. Of course that money should come with strings. If you give it at all. I mean, like I said, the Democratic Party could have started off with a position and fought for that position, putting the onus on the Republican Party to make a choice on their particular bill. They didn't do that. That's not what took place. We ended up with the Republicans effectively running the roost. And the people who are in the Senate fighting just for the barest of scraps. And while they're having that fight, Trump is basically saying, we don't need this many ventilators. We don't need this many ventilators. We don't need this much. Trump has signed this bill into law. He signed this bill into law. Now, Sanders was on the floor of the Senate going ham because the Republican Party tried to undercut this modest, weak bill. Keep in mind, they're not getting those ventilators. They're not making sure that people aren't evicted from their homes or have child care or making sure that this bill, meaning all of their medical bills and everything else is paid for or getting more tests. They're not doing any of that. $1,200 compared to a shitload of money that they're giving to the corporate class. And this is within the context of income inequality that is already through the roof, meaning this is just going to make it worse. With no restrictions on that money, they can use that money and buy up other stocks, other properties. I don't understand why the American public isn't pissed at that. He's depriving you of the things that you need in order to confront this particular virus. And you heard him right there. He's still talking about people going back to work. We're going to kickstart the economy again. That is against the advice of everybody. The United States right now is number one in the case of coronavirus cases around the world. Put that in perspective. China has what, 3 times our population, 3-4 times our population, and China has less cases than we do. We are number one in the world. And Donald Trump is talking about preparedness and sending people back to work while they are various explosions of this virus. This is only going to get worse. And despite only getting worse, Donald Trump, it just annoys me. People should be pissed off. They could have passed this bill just focusing on workers themselves in order to get these checks out. They didn't do that. They could have put strings on these bills. They didn't do that either. They could have focused the bulk of this money to ensure that people could stay home for 2 months as opposed to having to go to work, because you take that hit in the short term in order to flatten the curve so you can propel your economy a little bit later. They didn't do that either. None of those things were high priorities. They didn't use this to make sure that people weren't evicted from their homes. They didn't use this to ensure that people didn't lose their cars. None of that stuff. That's off the table. If you want to know what's important, meaning sometimes crises have this thing of focusing the mind. Well, that's not just with human beings, that's also with governments. You have a crisis. What do you care about? What's the thing that digs in you deep? What's the thing, the needs that you want to ensure get met? And it becomes clear over and over and over again, and this time is no different. The needs that get met are basically the corporate class, the plutocrats, the oligarchs, the people who give them cash. Those are the people who gets their needs serviced. While the public itself, the people who go out and vote for these various parties, who keep the economy ticking, who keep the economy running, the things that should matter, those people get the shaft or they get a token bit of support. What is the point of your government if it's not there to deal with the crisis and deal with the human issue of this? Meaning, are you okay with this? Meaning, wherever you are on the political spectrum, are you okay that in the time of crisis, you have a situation where the government attends to the needs of the people who need it the least, as opposed to dealing with the needs of the people who need it the most, meaning the public itself? We bailed them out in 2008, and right now they're turning around and doing it again, throwing trillions at these companies and at these various oligarchs. It's just aggravating, that's all. I mean, even Sanders went along with this. AOC, however, did not. AOC did not. And she was flipping out in Congress. This is AOC at her best.
What did the Senate majority fight for? One of the largest corporate bailouts with as few strings as possible in American history. Shameful. The greed of that fight is wrong for crumbs, for our families. And the option that we have is to either let them suffer with nothing or to allow this greed and billions of dollars, which will be leveraged into trillions of dollars, to contribute to the largest income inequality gap in our future. There should be shame about what was fought for in this bill and the choices that we have to make. What did the Senate majority fight for? One of the largest.
And right there, that's the point. Basically, the test that they had to deal with is you have real pain that the American public is feeling at this very specific moment. And because you have that real pain, you can make the argument of, all right, we're going to throw $1,200 at you, but you're going to let us get what we want. And in this case, you have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, who for the most part serve the exact same people to some degree. I mean, oftentimes they hedge their bets. Meaning every incentive in the world is for these corporate Democrats, this main establishment of the party, to join hands with Republicans and pass this bill, just like they pass every other tax cut or every other war budget to give back to their particular donors. They are fucking us over royally, which is my point. This is just a giveaway. This is just the giveaway with hush money to the American public. And then your concerns may get dealt with. But Trump is trying to force people back to work because Donald Trump doesn't want to deal with the fact that you have to deal with these people who are not working in those jobs. Meaning, if you keep those people off for 2 months, you got to pay for those people. You got to pay for the medical bills for those people. You got to handle all that. So his resource has been to we're going to force people back to work. Yeah, we're being hosed. We're being hosed. This is Sanders. And again, you're stuck with this weird position of, do you not cater to the whims? Meaning, if everybody in Congress said, yeah, we want to do this, which is literally what took place in the Senate, 96-0. If you were Sanders or if you were Warren, how do you push back on that? Meaning, do you try to derail the entirety of the vote? What do you do with this? He chose, let's get the money out. I'll work around the edges. Let's get the cash out. The public is hurting. Let's compromise. Is that the correct answer? That's the question, right? Is that the correct answer? Now, the key point is those checks, yes, some people are going to get them in maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, but other people are not going to get them for months. Meaning, if you would have had a clean bill, you might have been able to get that money out that much faster. Even now, meaning you might have still been having this kind of back and forth, this kind of fight, but the rate of time or the speed at which you're going to get the money out may end up being the exact same thing if you held out with your particular plan and you put that plan out first. No fucking imagination, no fire, no pushback, incrementalism. They have just signed on to a Republican bill that effectively guts the country and transfers that much more wealth to the top for the token change of $1,200 without dealing with any of the material concerns of the coronavirus.
I want this thing passed as soon as possible. What happened is Senator Graham and some other Republicans, they are just terribly upset that low-income workers might receive a bit more money than they otherwise would have earned. Here we are in the midst of the worst economic downturn perhaps since the Great Depression. Tens of millions of people are worried to death about how they're going to feed their families, pay their rent, prevent a foreclosure. And these guys are just staying up nights, worrying about low-income workers getting a few bucks more. And what I have said is if they are prepared to drop their hold, which I believe they are, by the way, I am certainly not going to persist in what I want. But I just wanted to make it clear that I will not sit back, nor should anybody sit back and allow these guys to attack the needs of low-income workers, especially.
Here's the thing. If you and I are playing chess, and I need to get at your king, or I need to get some kind of concession from you, there's something I need to get. I want to get some kind of advantage or something. I may hit something that is not necessarily vital to you. I may hit something that's not necessarily all that crucial to you, but it does divert your attention away in ways that allow me to get at what I actually want to get to. In this particular case, the Republican Party is effectively attacking workers, meaning they're attacking this kind of maximalist position of not only are we going to have a measly bill that doesn't deal with the material concerns, we're going to go further than that and try to essentially slap the poor. Those poor are undeserving of the same amount of money that we're going to give everybody else. Meaning Sanders is fighting on that front. But think about what that means. If you're fighting on this basic front of, yeah, people should get more money, that's like arguing about whether or not, like the position of rape. And I know it's not exact of one-to-one, but you're arguing something onerous and something that should kind of go without question. But because you're making that argument about that thing that's onerous and goes without question, the larger position about whether or not you should even fund this bill, whether or not you should have passed your own bill, those questions go off the table to just whether or not you agree with these modest, small points. Meaning because they're hitting him on even small points, trying to get larger points becomes that much more difficult. It's somewhat of a diversion and allowing the bill to just be a corporate giveaway. They know there's all sort of political will against coming out against this bill. They would use it to go after you saying they're letting America starve, they're letting America starve. And again, the Democratic Party didn't necessarily give an alternative, which means that Trump, who's royally fucking up right now, is going to get a win. And he's going to use that win to make the point of, I'm giving all of this money to America. I'm Donald Trump. This was the Republican plan. This is what we wanted to do. Schumer and Pelosi was against me doing it. It's going to be that. I don't know how long he skates on that. But let's just be very clear what this is. We have just been royally screwed. Like, share, subscribe.